The morning sun filtered softly through the wooden slats of the window shutters, casting golden stripes across the kitchen floor. The scent of yesterday's adobo still faintly lingered in the air, now mingled with the faint aroma of freshly steeped tea. It was quiet, peaceful, and for once the weight of the world outside felt far away. Inigo stood at the counter again, hands folded, gaze drifting thoughtfully toward the closed pantry door. He glanced over his shoulder at Lyra, who sat cross-legged at the table with her chin resting on her palm, watching him with sleepy curiosity. "You're planning something," she said, half amused. "You're damn right I am," Inigo said. "I made you dinner yesterday. Today you're having breakfast from my world." Lyra blinked. "Another one? Another one. I promised." She smiled and stretched her arms over her head. "All right then, show me what breakfast looks like where you're from." Inigo turned back to the shelves, rummaging carefully. "It's something simple, but it hits hard when made right." His voice carried a mix of fondness and determination. "We call it Silog." "Silog?" Lyra repeated. "Yep. It's a portmanteau. Garlic fried rice, eggs, and some kind of meat. Tapsilog is with beef tapa. Tosilog is with sweet pork. Long Silog uses longanisa, which is a garlicky sausage. But I'm improvising today." He pulled out the remaining rice from yesterday and placed it in a bowl. Then he reached for a small pouch of local sausages they bought from the market on a whim. "It won't be exactly the same, but it's close enough." Lyra stood up and walked over to observe. "You fry the rice in garlic again?" "Oh yes," Inigo said, tossing chopped garlic into a hot pan. The crackling sound filled the air, instantly releasing its sharp, familiar aroma. Garlic fried rice is the heart of the dish. It's called sinangag back home. "Sinangag," Lyra echoed, carefully sounding it out. "Good. You're getting the hang of it," he said with a grin. He moved with rhythm and ease, adding a spoonful of oil to the rice and tossing it expertly in the pan. The grains took on a golden sheen and the garlic bits began to crisp. Next he moved to a second pan and dropped in the sausages, which sizzled and spit as they caramelized. The final step was a pair of eggs. He cracked them carefully and let them fry with sunny yolks gleaming. "You always cook like this?" Lyra asked. "I used to do it every Sunday," Inigo replied, flipping one egg. "It was a tradition back home. Wake up late, cook Silog, eat slow, drink coffee. A small moment of peace." Lyra was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds comforting." "It was," Inigo said softly. "I didn't realize how important those routines were until I lost them." She watched him closely but said nothing more as he plated the food. 1 scoop of garlic fried rice. 2 glistening sausages. A fried egg with a runny yolk on top. He garnished it with chopped herbs and handed her a plate with pride. "This is my version of long Silog," he declared. They sat down across from each other at the small table once again, the warm plates between them and a faint breeze wafting in through the open window. Lyra wasted no time. She sliced into the sausage and took a bite. The sweetness of the meat hit first, followed by the strong garlicky backdrop of the rice and the creamy egg yolk that mixed into everything like a sauce. "Oh wow," she mumbled through her bite. "It's like breakfast with attitude." Inigo laughed. "That's one way to describe it. It's savory and sweet and heavy enough to fill you up. I like this more than the bread and soup we get at the guild canteen." "Glad you think so," Inigo said, already halfway through his own plate. "There's a whole range of Silog combinations back home. Each family has their own way of preparing it." "I can see why. You've got me addicted to your world's cooking now," Lyra teased. He leaned back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. "Food was always a big deal for us. It wasn't just survival, it was connection. Something you shared with people. A form of love." Lyra's smile softened. "I think I'm starting to understand that." After the meal, they washed the dishes together, sharing quiet conversation over running water. When the last plate was cleaned and dried, Lyra turned to him and asked, "What else do you miss about your world?" Inigo paused. "The little things. The smell of rain on hot concrete. The sound of jeepneys and tricycles honking during rush hour. Weekend karaoke parties. Street food vendors yelling prices. And my mom's cooking." Lyra touched his arm gently. "You bring your world here through every story, every dish. It's not lost." He looked at her, eyes meeting hers. "Thanks." They spent the rest of the morning lounging, Inigo sketching ideas for future upgrades in his notebook and Lyra tending to her weapons. Occasionally they talk about future hunts or wonder aloud if the Lord of Destruction was truly laying low or planning something greater. By midday Lyra stood and stretched. "All right, chef. What's next?" Inigo raised a brow. "Hungry already?" "No," she said with a laugh. "I mean for today. Are we heading back to the guild? Another job?" He thought about it then shook his head. "Let's take the rest of today off. We've earned it. Maybe I'll teach you how to cook sinigang next." "Sinigang?" she asked, curious again. "A sour tamarind-based soup," he replied. "Usually made with pork, fish, or shrimp. Hearty. Comforting. The kind of thing you want during stormy weather." Lyra grinned. "I look forward to it." She walked to the window, gazing out at the sunlit streets below. "You know," she said softly, "if this world ends tomorrow, I'd still be glad I got to taste your memories." Inigo smiled, standing beside her. "Then I'll make sure you taste as many as I can." And for a while longer the war could wait. The morning air in Elandra was unusually crisp, a cool breeze slipping through the window shutters and gently ruffling the curtains. Inigo stood barefoot in the kitchen, tying the apron around his waist as the smell of cooking oil began to fill the room. Today's breakfast had a mission behind it, one that went beyond full stomachs. He glanced at the clock. Just past 8. Early enough that the city was only beginning to stir. Behind him, Lyra shuffled into the room, rubbing her eyes and yawning. She wore one of his oversized tunics and a pair of soft pants that reached her ankles. Her hair was a tousled mess, but her eyes lit up the moment she spotted what was happening on the stove. "Another Psylog morning?" she asked, voice still raspy with sleep. "Damn right," Inigo said with a smirk. "Thought I'd make long Psylog again. Can't go wrong with that one." She slipped into a chair and rested her chin on her palm, smiling. "I'm starting to associate the smell of garlic rice with safety. You know that. That means I'm doing something right." He tossed the chopped garlic into the heated pan. The satisfying sizzle kicked off the familiar aroma that made Lyra visibly perk up. "And today's breakfast comes with a conversation." "Oh?" she asked, eyes narrowing playfully. "What kind of conversation? Romantic or mission-related?" He laughed, grabbing the leftover rice from the pot and adding it into the pan. "Business-related, actually." "That's new." "Not really." He turned and gave her a pointed look. "Remember McCronald's?" Lyra blinked, then slowly leaned back in her seat. "McCronald's? You mean the burger stand we opened?" "Exactly." Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "That was months ago. We had to shut it down because of all the missions." "Yeah, but people loved it. Remember the line of customers? Knights, students, even nobles? That place was getting traction before everything went sideways." Lyra tilted her head, her smile returning. "You're thinking of reopening?" "Not just reopening," Inigo said as he plated the long Psylog, golden garlic fried rice, sweet sausages glistening, and a perfectly fried sunny-side-up egg. He set the plate down in front of her. "I'm thinking of making it permanent. This city's missing something and I've got the solution." Lyra took a bite, her eyes practically rolling back in delight. "You know, you really shouldn't be allowed to cook like this and casually talk about empire building at the same time." He chuckled. "I'm serious. The guild's quiet. There are fewer high-level contracts lately. We've got some breathing room. I was thinking, it might be time to invest in a proper kitchen. Expand McCronald's into an actual place, not just a small resto." "You mean, like a building?" "Exactly. We find a spot near the plaza. High foot traffic. We get a basic structure, hire 2 or 3 staff to handle the counter and the kitchen when I'm not around. I'll teach them the recipes. Burgers and fries just like last time, but this time with proper seats, tables and maybe even a painted sign." Lyra chewed thoughtfully. "You're serious about this?" "I am." She set her fork down and looked at him directly. "Why now?" Inigo leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Because this world needs more than adventurers and danger. It needs good food. It needs places where people can sit down, eat, laugh, and remember they're human. If I can bring even a sliver of my world's comfort here, then maybe I'm doing something that matters." Lyra watched him for a long second, then smiled softly. "That's the most sentimental reason I've ever heard for selling burgers." He gave a mock bow. "Thank you. I'm in, she said with a nod. But only if I get to be the official taste tester. Deal, Inigo grinned. Also your management now. Oh gods, that's terrifying. They finished their breakfast in good spirits, the sound of cutlery and laughter filling the cozy kitchen. After cleaning up, Inigo pulled out an old leather-bound notebook from the shelf. The cover was worn and the pages were filled with rough sketches of buildings, ideas for menu items and scribbled notes on pricing. This is what I've been working on, he said, flipping the book open. I already have a few designs for a small diner layout. Something modular, nothing too extravagant. Tables for 8 groups, a counter and a back kitchen. Lyra looked over the pages, impressed. You really mapped it out. I do this when I can't sleep. She pointed at one of the pages. What's this? Crispy chicken sandwich. He gave a sheepish smile. Work in progress. I want that one. He laughed again. Noted. By noon they headed into the city. The streets were busy now, with vendors setting up for the afternoon rush. Inigo led the way toward the plaza, where the original McCronald's stall had once stood. The spot was currently empty. Just a stone-paved square with a few benches nearby and a steady stream of foot traffic passing through. This is the place, he said. Perfect visibility. Near the guild, near the student district. If we rebuild here, we'll catch every type of customer. Lyra folded her arms and studied the space. So what's the plan? I'll visit the local construction guild tomorrow. Commission a small building. Use the funds I saved from our past contracts. Then we'll need permits from the city council, but with the guild's backing that should be easy. I'm betting we could be open in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay, 3 if we take our time. Lyra stepped closer, bumping his shoulder. Then I guess I better start working on my customer service smile. I'm already terrified for the customers. I'll be charming, she said, grinning wickedly. More like intimidating. That works too. They stood there for a while watching people pass by. Some adventurers, others ordinary townsfolk, students from the academy, even a few nobles with their guards. This city's alive, Inigo murmured. It deserves more than what it has. Lyra looked at him sideways. You're trying to change the world, one burger at a time. He smiled. Exactly. Back at the house, Inigo spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a formal plan for the reopening. Lyra helped brainstorm potential names for combo meals and suggested uniforms for the staff. Something red and black, sleek but not too flashy. She even suggested adding Psylog to the breakfast menu for adventurers passing through in the morning. By evening, their table was covered in notes, sketches, and parchment. This is really happening, Lyra said. It is. They stood over the window, watching the sun dip behind the towers of Elandra. Tomorrow the work would begin. But tonight they allowed themselves to dream. The sun was just beginning to crest over the rooftops of Elandra when the aroma of sizzling meat and frying potatoes began to drift into the cobbled streets of the Western Plaza. It mingled with the morning air like a siren call, tugging at the noses and stomachs of passers-by. The building wasn't grand. Inigo hadn't wanted it to be. It was compact and charming, made of red stone and wood beams, with a slanted shingle roof and wide windows. Above the entrance, a wooden sign hung proudly with the painted words, McCronald's, burgers and fries. Inside, the layout was tight but functional. A wooden counter with a brass bell stood in front of a modest kitchen visible through an open service window. 8 small tables lined the dining area, each made of sturdy local oak. A painted chalkboard on the wall listed the menu. Burger plus fries combo, 5 coppers. Double burger meal, 7 coppers. Adventurer's feast, 2x burgers, large fries, 10 coppers. Morning fried egg rice bowl, 4 coppers. Available until 10 a.m. Add egg, 1 copper. Add soda, 2 coppers. Behind the counter, Inigo wore a dark red apron and a short-sleeved tunic, his hair tied back. Lyra stood beside him, arms crossed and a rare smirk on her face, also wearing a matching apron, though hers had a dagger tucked discreetly at her hip. Doors open in 10 minutes, Inigo said, glancing at the small wall clock they'd installed. You ready? Lyra raised a brow. To cook burgers for half the city? Not really. Too late. You're employee number 1. I demand hazard pay. You'll get a burger after your shift. She rolled her eyes but grinned. Fair enough. Their two hired staff, a pair of local teens named Rico and Maddie, stood nervously behind them, wiping down trays and double-checking that the condiments were stocked. "Remember," Inigo said, turning to the pair, "you take the orders, repeat them back clearly, and always smile. We're not just selling food, we're giving people something to remember." Rico nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "Sir," Inigo echoed, laughing. "No need for that. Just call me Inigo." Lyra leaned in. "But do call me Commander." The teens paled for a second until they saw her grin and realized she was, mostly, joking. Outside, a small crowd had already begun to gather. The rumors had spread fast. McCronald's was back. Adventurers who remembered the stall months ago were now returning with their guildmates. Locals who'd caught the scent of cooking meat were drifting in, curious and hungry. Even a few off-duty guards had stopped by, lured in by the promise of foreign food that actually tastes good. Inigo took a breath and pushed open the door. "All right," he called. "We're open." The crowd surged forward, not like a riot but like a stream, everyone trying to be first in line. Rico and Maddie sprang into action, manning the front with shaky confidence. Inigo stepped into the kitchen, tossing patties onto the grill with practiced rhythm, while Lyra dropped baskets of chopped potatoes into the bubbling fryer. The sound was glorious, crackling oil, sizzling meat, and the soft shuffle of feet as the tables filled one by one. "2 double burgers, one with egg," Rico called. "On it." Inigo flipped a patty. "Lyra, fries up." "Already frying." He layered cheese, added lettuce and sliced tomatoes, then slid the buns together and wrapped them in wax paper. He handed them off just as Lyra emptied a golden batch of fries into the tray. "Next." By mid-morning the pace hadn't slowed. If anything, it had picked up. "We're out of eggs." Lyra shouted over the din. Rico, check the pantry. "Got it." The boy rushed through the swinging back door. Inigo was sweating, his sleeves rolled up, face flushed, but there was a gleam in his eyes. This wasn't just food service. This was a show. And he was the lead act. Customer after customer walked away grinning, mouths full and fingers greasy. Kids shared fries. Adventurers toasted their burgers with wooden cups of soda, and one old merchant was seen wiping a tear after his first bite of long silog. "This," Inigo said to Lyra during a lull, "is exactly what I wanted." She looked around at the crowded tables, at the chatter, at the joy, then smiled. "It's like a second guild. A tastier one." Even the city officials who had approved his permit arrived near noon, sampling the menu under the guise of a site inspection. One of them, Councilman Brandt, was so impressed he offered to sponsor a second branch if they ever expanded. "We'll think about it," Inigo said with a grin. After the initial rush, the lunch crowd trickled into afternoon regulars. Students with study scrolls, guards on break, and a couple of mages from the local academy. At the front, a bell above the door jingled and a familiar face stepped in. It was the old man who ran the neighboring bookshop. He gave Inigo a slow nod of approval and quietly ordered a morning silog bowl, despite it being hours past breakfast. "Make it for him," Inigo whispered to Rico. "He's one of the good ones." As Lyra mopped up a spill near one of the tables, a small girl tugged at her apron. "Miss Lyra?" She knelt. "Yes." "Is the man in the kitchen really from another world?" Lyra blinked, then chuckled. "He likes to say that, doesn't he? But he makes the best food ever." Lyra smiled. "Yes. He really does." By late afternoon they finally closed the door, hanging a simple sign, "Sold out." Inside, the place looked like a battlefield. Empty trays, sauce splatters, crumpled paper wrappers, but everyone was grinning. Inigo collapsed onto a bench with a long sigh. "We did it." "You did it," Lyra corrected, handing him a cold mug of water. "No way. This took all 4 of us." He raised his mug. "To burgers, fries, and teamwork." They clinked mugs, and even Rico and Maddie joined in despite their exhaustion. As the sun dipped low and bathed the diner in gold, Inigo looked around. The place was small. The paint still smelled fresh. The stove was already stained. But it was theirs. More than a business, it was a slice of home in a world that didn't have one. And that made it perfect. "Same time tomorrow?" Lyra asked. Inigo smiled. "You bet." The morning rush at McCronald's had passed, leaving behind a gentle lull and the cozy scent of fried potatoes clinging to the rafters. The tables had cleared out, save for a few students huddled over scrolls and munching fries, and an elderly couple quietly enjoying the morning Psylocke bowl near the back corner. The kitchen had been cleaned to an acceptable level of still busy but not a disaster, and Inigo had finally leaned back on the counter with a satisfied sigh. He wiped the sweat off his brow with a rag. All right. That was smoother than yesterday. We're starting to find our rhythm. Lyra leaned beside him, arms crossed, sipping from a wooden cup of soda. Told you hiring help would make a difference. Rico nearly forgot to serve a soda to table 4. And Maddie almost poured ketchup into someone's tea. Inigo chuckled. But no fights broke out. No one died. That's a win. As if on cue, the bell over the front door jingled. Lyra gave a sideways glance. Another late customer? Inigo looked up. His smirk faded slightly into something more surprised. 2 familiar figures stepped through the entrance, poised and out of place amid the grease and chatter of a humble fast food joint. Elise was the first to speak, her voice carrying its usual crispness as she walked up to the counter. So this is the famous McCronald's. I've heard rumors about it for weeks now, but I didn't think you were serious. Guildmaster Thorn followed behind her with that same unshakable presence. Broad, calm, yet always a touch intimidating, like a storm cloud that hadn't decided whether to pass or strike. Inigo stood straighter and gave a half smile. Well, if I knew royalty was dropping by, I'd have rolled out the red carpet. Thorn arched a brow. Spare me the theatrics, Inigo. I'm here for 2 things. Lunch and business. Preferably in that order. We can do both, Inigo said, stepping aside. Please have a seat. We'll bring the food to you. They chose a table near the window, close enough to see the small crowd still milling outside eyeing the open again at 3 p.m. sign. Elise tugged her gloves off and draped her uniform jacket over the back of her chair. Lyra leaned toward Inigo as they stepped into the kitchen. You think this is about the Lord of Destruction? If it is, I don't want to hear it over fries. He grabbed 2 trays and prepped 2 of their best-selling meals, the double burger meal and the adventurer's feast, complete with large fries and soda. He added extra sauce packets, unofficial policy when serving guild officials. A few minutes later, Inigo stepped out and delivered the trays himself. Double burger for the guildmaster. Adventurer's feast for Elandra's sharpest receptionist. Elise narrowed her eyes with a smirk. Flattery won't get you out of paperwork, you know. I was hoping it might buy me a few extra days before the next one. Thorn examined his burger like it was a tactical report, then took a deliberate bite. For a moment there was silence. Then he chewed, nodded once and took another, larger bite. I see the rumors were true, Thorn said between mouthfuls. Juicy, flavorful and unlike anything I've tasted in Elandra. Elise was less reserved. This is so much better than whatever the guild cafeteria calls food. How is it crispy and soft at the same time? Magic, Inigo replied flatly. She rolled her eyes and reached for a fry. Seriously, why did you wait this long to reopen this place? Inigo leaned against a support beam, arms crossed. Took a while to get a permit, find a place, hire help, and I was still recovering from our recent adventures. Thorn, still chewing, raised a hand. You're alive. You got paid. You even got a business out of it. Sure, but it wouldn't kill you to send someone else next time. Thorn wiped his mouth with a napkin and set down the half-eaten burger. About that. Inigo's smile faded. You're not here just for the food. No, Thorn said simply. Elise dabbed the corners of her lips with a handkerchief. It's not a normal request either. Not something we're putting on the public boards. Of course it isn't, Inigo said, exhaling. We just reopened, Thorn. I haven't even had time to adjust the salt balance in the fries. It's urgent. Inigo frowned. How urgent? The kind of urgent that might affect the city. He looked at Lyra. Her expression mirrored his, annoyed, resigned, but attentive. Thorn added, I wouldn't be here in person if it wasn't serious. I know you're trying to build something here. I respect that. Doesn't feel like it when you're here to pull us back into the field. I need people I can trust, Thorn said firmly. People who've proven they can think, adapt, and survive. And more importantly, people who understand the stakes. Inigo walked back behind the counter, pretending to rearrange spice jars while thinking. Elise watched him. If it helps, this job comes with significant pay. Enough to cover a month's worth of rent and more. Not about the money, Inigo muttered. I know, Elise said softly. But it might buy this place a bit more breathing room. Inigo glanced at Lyra. What do you think? He shrugged. We'll eventually get dragged into something big whether we like it or not. Better we get paid for it. You've been hanging around me too long, he muttered. She smirked. You made me a manager. This is what you get. With a long exhale, Inigo walked back to their table and dropped into the seat across from Thorn. All right. Tell us when and where. But I'm not pulling double shifts. Lyra runs the place while I'm gone. I thought you said you'd go, Lyra said surprised. I am. But someone needs to make sure Rico doesn't burn the fryer down. Thorn looked satisfied. He pushed the rest of his burger aside and stood up. We'll send the briefing scroll to your house by sundown. Departures tomorrow morning. Pack light. Elise polished off her fries and smiled. Good thing you've got a few more hours until the next wave. Use it to rest. Or fry more potatoes, Inigo muttered. As they left, the bell above the door jingled again. The scent of fresh burgers lingered in the air. Lyra stood beside him, arms crossed again. Guess we're back in the game. Inigo glanced around the diner. The red-painted sign. The sizzling grill. The scent of garlic oil and toasted buns. Their world. And soon the other one. Yeah, he murmured. But at least we're bringing burgers with us this time. The early afternoon sun bathed Elandra in golden light as Inigo and Lyra approached the Adventurers Guild. The stone and wood building stood tall and sturdy, its arched entrance flanked by banners bearing the Eldrith crest, a silver stag against a forest green background. Adventurers came and went, some battered from recent missions, others loitering with mugs of ale and loud laughter. But Inigo and Lyra bypassed the bustle, heading straight inside. The guild hall was its usual organized chaos, requests posted on boards, clerks scribbling in ledgers, adventurers haggling over bounties. At the center, the reception desk was manned by Elise, who looked up as they approached. Inigo. Lyra, she said with a faint smile. Right on time. The guildmaster's waiting for you upstairs. Hopefully with coffee, Inigo muttered, brushing imaginary flour off his apron. He was still technically on break. Lyra gave Elise a nod before following Inigo up the stairs. The second floor was quieter, lined with rooms for guild officials and private consultations. At the end of the hallway stood a heavy oak door with brass trim, Guildmaster Thorn's office. Inigo knocked once. Enter, came Thorn's voice from inside. They stepped in. The room was large but uncluttered. A wide desk dominated the center, piled with scrolls, documents, and a few maps pinned with colored markers. A low-burning hearth kept the chill at bay, while tall windows offered a sweeping view of Elandra's western quarter. Thorn stood beside the desk, arms crossed, while Elise leaned against a nearby cabinet, arms folded. Take a seat, Thorn said, gesturing to the chairs across from him. Let's not waste time. Inigo dropped into a seat. Lyra took the other, remaining upright and alert. So, Inigo began, what's so urgent that you had to pull us from our glorious career in burger flipping? Elise passed a scroll to Thorn, who unfurled it and laid it flat on the desk. It revealed a detailed map of the Eldrith region. Thorn tapped a section northeast of Elandra, near the mountain ranges bordering the mining province. This, he said, is the mining district of Eldrith. You know it as the country's primary source of iron and rare ore. It's what fuels our forges, ships, and armories. I'm familiar, Inigo said, leaning forward. That's where the guild sends C-rank teams to escort caravans. Correct, Thorn replied. But about 3 weeks ago one of our mining outposts went silent. No messengers. No reports. Nothing. Elise chimed in. At first we thought it was a delay. Bad weather, a collapsed tunnel. Happens sometimes. But then 2 more outposts stopped responding. Lyra frowned. So what happened? Thorn's tone hardened. Scouts were sent. Only one came back. Half dead, covered in webs. He said the caves are infested. A nest of spiders. Large ones. Too many for a regular squad to handle. Spiders, Inigo said dryly. Of course it's spiders. Not just normal ones, Elise said, pulling another scroll. She unfurled it, revealing a sketch made by the survivor. The creatures drawn had bloated bodies, segmented legs the length of pikes, and venomous fangs that dripped in the crude ink depiction. According to the scout, she continued, these things have overrun the caves. They come out at night, drag workers back inside and hang them like livestock. Some are the size of carts. We suspect a brood mother may be present, something intelligent enough to organize the swarm. Inigo scratched his chin. So why not send an army? Thorn's expression darkened. We can't. Eldritha's military is spread thin. A group of nobles has been pressuring the court for more troops along the southern coast due to pirate raids. The guild has been asked to handle the mine issue discreetly. And by discreet, Inigo said, you mean 2 people. You're not just any 2 people, Thorn replied. You've faced things most can't. You survived the rift, quelled the arcane anomaly at Black Hollow and dealt with a wyvern outbreak. You know how to adapt. And fry potatoes, Lyra added. Elise gave a brief chuckle. Think of this as a temporary leave of absence. Clear the caves. Confirm if there's a brood mother. Burn the nest if possible. Inigo sighed, folding his arms. So it's spelunking, extermination, and maybe a giant mutant spider queen? That's the mission, Thorn said. Any other team up for the task? None with your blend of firepower, strategy, and experience. Lyra spoke up. Do we have any supplies waiting? Equipment caches. Elise nodded. A supply caravan is already en route. They've left basic provisions, rations, torches, oil barrels, outside the cave mouth, hidden in a camouflaged storage shack. They didn't dare go further. Can't say I blame them, Inigo muttered. Thorn stepped around the desk and stood in front of them. We don't know how deep the infestation goes. If they've burrowed new tunnels, this could become a larger threat to Eldritha's mining economy. And by extension the kingdom's war machine, Inigo finished. Exactly. There was a heavy pause. Then Inigo leaned back in his chair. Well, we said yes already. Might as well see it through. Departure at dawn? Lyra asked. Thorn nodded. A horse-drawn cart will take you as far as the ridge. After that it's a 2-hour trek through the hills. Lovely, Inigo said. Remind me to pack bug spray. Thorn handed him a sealed envelope. This is the official contract. Payment upon completion. Hazard bonus if the broodmother is confirmed and eliminated. Inigo took it and tucked it into his coat. Elise added, I'd also suggest prepping something from your other inventory. Her eyes flicked to him knowingly. He nodded. Yeah. Might be time to bring out the heavy gear. They stood to leave. As they reached the door, Thorn called out one last thing. Inigo. Don't underestimate this. I never do, Inigo replied. But if it helps, I also never go in without a plan. They exited the room and made their way back down the stairs. The guild hall was still lively, but they were quiet as they stepped into the street again. The dawn air was crisp and a low mist still clung to the base of Elandra's towering walls as Inigo and Lyra stood just beyond the city gates. There was no carriage. No horses. No hired drivers waiting with reins in hand. Just 2 people and an empty stretch of dirt road winding toward the northeast hills. Inigo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded black parchment, sealed with a wax insignia, gears and wings etched clean into the crimson surface. With a thumb he cracked the seal. A faint glow shimmered in the air around him as a translucent interface appeared, visible only to his eyes. He swiped through the selections with muscle memory more than thought, pausing at a familiar listing. Summon. JLTV Tactical Vehicle. Confirm? He tapped it. A low hum vibrated through the air. The grass around them fluttered not from wind, but from the sudden displacement of magic. Lines of light etched themselves onto the ground, sketching the form of a vehicle before it fully materialized. In seconds, metal shimmered into existence, tires dropped into place, and the unmistakable bulk of a JLTV locked into the real world with a mechanical thud. The tan beast of a vehicle stood gleaming in the morning sun, already humming with latent power. Lyra didn't even flinch. She stepped forward, opened the passenger side door and climbed in without a word. Took you long enough, she said dryly. Inigo smirked and followed her in. Well, excuse me for trying to make an entrance. Not the first time I've ridden in this monster, she said, buckling herself in. Still not the most graceful ride. Graceful? No, Inigo agreed. He twisted the ignition switch and the engine roared to life, a deep guttural growl echoing across the countryside. But reliable? Hell yes. The JLTV rumbled forward, its massive tires crushing gravel as it picked up speed. Trees blurred past in streaks of green and brown as they made their way northeast along the old mining trail. The road became rougher as they gained elevation, but the vehicle's suspension absorbed the terrain with ease. Inside, the dash glowed with soft blue lights. A digital map synced to Inigo's interface displayed their path, north-northeast toward the old Eldrith mining ridge. A pulsing marker blinked where the spider nest was reported. Ease 25 minutes, he said, keeping one hand on the wheel and the other adjusting the sling of his M4 carbine, which rested across his chest. Lyra sat quietly in the passenger seat, longbow resting between her knees, fingers lightly drumming on her thigh. Her eyes weren't just staring ahead, they were scanning, mentally cataloging everything. The terrain, the foliage, the way shadows shifted with the rising sun. She always got like this before missions. Focused. Hey, Inigo said after a minute. Ever seriously think about switching that bow out for something modern? Lyra turned her head slightly, one brow raised. Not to insult your archery, he added quickly, you're damn good with it. But sometimes I wonder what you'd be like with a G36 or even a simple SMG. Fire rate, range, fewer reloads. Could be fun. She considered it for a beat. I've thought about it. Every time you whip out one of those weapons and mow down 5 enemies before I loose a second arrow, it crosses my mind. Inigo grinned. So what's stopping you? You mostly. He blinked. Me. You've never offered, she said with a small shrug. And I wasn't sure if you'd actually trust me with one of your magic weapons. Inigo chuckled. Lyra, I've trusted you to cover my 6 while we were waist-deep in Rift Spawn. I think I can trust you not to shoot yourself in the foot. Then yes, she said nodding. I'd like to try one. Maybe after this job. When we're back and not crawling through spider webs. He reached over and tapped her shoulder. You got it. I'll give you something solid. Light, stable, good for mid-range. I'm thinking G36C. It's beginner-friendly but still packs a punch. Lyra looked genuinely pleased. I'm holding you to that. The JLTV crested a ridge, revealing the forest below stretching out like a sea of green. In the far distance, nestled between 2 jagged cliffs, was the gaping black mouth of the cave. Even from here the air looked stagnant. No movement. No birdsong. Just a dull silence hanging over the forest like a curse. Inigo slowed the vehicle and pulled off the road toward a barely visible wooden shack, covered in moss and vines. A faded red cloth fluttered weakly from a nailed post, guild marker for a supply cache. They stopped. The two stepped out. Inigo popped the rear compartment of the JLTV and pulled out a hard case. Inside were 2 loaded M4 mags, several flashbangs, incendiary grenades, and a compact medical kit. He clipped the kit to his belt and handed a flashbang to Lyra. Close quarters backup, he said. She nodded and tucked it into her belt without a word. They approached the shack next. Inside were basic supplies: torches, rope, dried rations, and oil jars. Inigo stuffed 2 torches into his pack and took a coil of rope, slinging it over his shoulder. As he turned to leave, he noticed Lyra holding a torch of her own, staring silently toward the cave in the distance. You feel it too? He asked. She nodded. The air's wrong. Like the forest is holding its breath. Inigo crouched, running gloved fingers along the soil. He scooped some into a sample vial and sealed it. Whatever's in that cave, it's changing the environment. Let's make sure it doesn't change the rest of Eldrith. He stood, slinging his rifle back into place. Let's move. They hiked the remaining few hundred meters on foot, moving through uneven ground and brittle brush until they stood at the mouth of the cavern. Up close, the entrance looked worse. Jagged stone framed the opening like broken teeth. Webbing clung to the walls in glistening strands, some thin and wispy, others thick as rope. A few of the strands pulsed as if alive. Bones littered the entrance. Some human, some animal, all stripped clean. Lyra lit her torch. A soft orange glow cast shadows along the rock face, revealing the full extent of the webbing. It coated nearly every surface, trailing off into the blackness like veins. Inigo clicked his rifle to semi-auto. Stay sharp. You think they're watching us? She asked quietly. Oh, no doubt. Spiders like these. They're probably already surrounding us. He didn't say it to scare her, it was just likely. These weren't normal spiders. If the Guild Scout was right, there was a brood mother deeper inside. Intelligent, tactical, and territorial. Lyra held her torch higher. You want to go first, or shall I? You've got the light, Inigo said, motioning with his rifle. I'll cover your six. They exchanged one last look, then stepped into the cave. The cave swallowed them whole. Darkness pressed in from every side as Inigo and Lyra stepped beyond the web-laced mouth of the cavern. Only the flickering torch in Lyra's hand pushed back the shadows, revealing a long, descending tunnel lined with slick stone and hanging strands of silk. The air was dense, humid, sticky, and foul. Every breath carried the scent of mildew and decay, layered with something sharp and venomous. Inigo moved first, rifle raised. His boots crunched softly over gravel and brittle bones. The M4 felt solid in his hands, its cold body steady against the thrum of anticipation rising in his chest. He had fought worse things than spiders, but that didn't make this pleasant. Webs are fresh, Lyra whispered behind him. They're close. Inigo nodded once. His enchanted eyes scanned the dim corridor. Small glints of movement danced between strands. His free hand flexed instinctively, channeling his magic. Blue light shimmered faintly over his legs. Then he vanished, just for a blink, and reappeared 10 meters ahead in a flash of speed, silent as a shadow. Lyra jogged up behind him, bow already knocked with an arrow. A little warning next time? Gotta keep you on your toes, he replied. The tunnel widened, opening into a larger chamber. The torchlight revealed nests, bulbous sacs clinging to the walls, pulsing faintly like grotesque hearts. Egg clusters, no doubt. Targets on the ceiling, Inigo muttered. Above, pale shapes crawled within the webs. Spiderlings. Dozens. Each the size of a small dog with legs that clacked like bone on stone. Red eyes glimmered in the dark. One dropped. Contact. Inigo raised his rifle and fired. The sharp crack of the M4 echoed like a thunderclap, and the spiderling exploded mid-leap, ichor splattering across the cavern floor. 3 more dropped in its place. Lyra fired in quick succession. Her arrows glowed faintly with runes, simple enchantments for piercing. One bolt slammed into a spider's thorax, pinning it to the wall. Another struck a leg joint, disabling the creature. The third hit clean between the eyes. The rest hissed, alerted, and began pouring from the walls like a wave. Fall back. Inigo shouted, planting his foot and unloading a controlled burst into the mass. The M4 barked again and again. Shells clattered to the ground. Bodies dropped, twitching, shrieking. Lyra pivoted beside him, loosing arrows with mechanical precision. She moved like a dancer, fluid, alert, calm. One arrow to the mouth. Another to the eye. Then a sweeping kick to knock away a lunging spider before driving a shaft into its gut. They fought back to back, their movements honed by countless battles. Inigo's magic surged. His feet glowed faintly again. He dashed forward, faster than any man should be able, blurring into the fray. A spiderling lunged only to find him already behind it. A clean shot to the thorax and it collapsed. Too many. Lyra called out, retreating toward a raised ledge of stone. Go high. Inigo replied, tossing her a flashbang. She caught it mid-step, climbed the ridge and threw. The explosion was brilliant. A burst of light and sound that disoriented the advancing swarm. Inigo capitalized on it. He jumped, an impossible leap that took him 10 feet into the air, and landed hard in the middle of a cluster. The shockwave of his landing staggered several spiderlings. He switched to burst fire, sweeping through the cluster with ruthless efficiency. The scent of gunpowder, ichor, and burning webs filled the air. Lyra rained down arrows from above, her shots never missing. Each one landed with deadly grace, thinning the swarm. She breathed evenly, controlling her pace, conserving her ammunition. But even she couldn't help but mutter, "There's got to be 100 of them." "More like 50 left," Inigo said, flipping over a boulder to reload behind cover. "I counted." "Of course you did." Another group of spiderlings skittered down the far wall. Inigo darted toward them with another magic-fueled dash, closing the gap in less than a second. One spider leapt at him, but he ducked under its bite and shoved the barrel of his carbine into its mouth. One shot. The head burst apart like a melon. He spun and fired a 3-round burst at another climbing up behind Lyra. Above you. Lyra twisted, grabbing a second arrow and driving it into the spider's face point blank. Thanks. Soon the last of the spiderlings fell twitching to the ground. The chamber was littered with bodies. Webbing burned at the edges from the incendiaries, casting flickering light across the walls. The silence was deafening. Inigo stood among the corpses, panting slightly, steam rising from his shoulders as his magical boost cooled off. Lyra dropped from her perch and surveyed the area, nudging a few twitching legs to make sure the threats were dead. Is that it? She asked. No, Inigo said, pointing to a narrow tunnel on the far side of the chamber. That's the real nest. He walked over and inspected the passage. Thick strands of silk clung to the entrance, almost like curtains. Beyond it, only darkness. We're close to the core, he muttered. Lyra replaced her quiver with a fresh one. Boss fight coming? Inigo nodded. Boss fight coming. They took a moment to recover. Inigo pulled out a field ration bar from his belt pouch and bit into it with a grimace. Still better than guild rations. Barely, Lyra said, gulping water from her canteen. He checked his ammo. 2 magazines left for the M4. He reached into his pouch and retrieved a slim rectangular crystal, slotting it into a bracer on his wrist. A faint hum indicated his enchantments were recharged. I'll lead in first, Inigo said. You cover me from the rear. Focus on the small ones if they swarm again. Got it. He slung the rifle back across his chest and pushed aside the curtain of silk. The tunnel narrowed briefly before opening into another vast chamber. Unlike the first, this one pulsed with faint violet light. Crystals embedded in the ceiling gave off a dim glow, illuminating the chamber in eerie shades. Webbing blanketed every surface. At the far end, something massive stirred, a shadow among shadows. Inigo held up a fist, halting Lyra behind him. It's asleep, he whispered. Or waiting. The sound of dripping echoed faintly. A low hiss vibrated through the chamber floor, almost too subtle to hear. I think that's our broodmother. We going in now? Inigo glanced at his rifle, then at the monster half-shrouded in darkness. Next chamber, he said, backing away. We fight it on our terms. They retreated into the tunnel again. Inigo took a breath and leaned against the wall, rechecking his loadout. Lyra was already tightening her bowstring. You ever fought something that big? She asked. Not with legs that many. They shared a look. No jokes now. No grins. Just mutual understanding. It was about to get real. Tomorrow's breakfast is on me, Inigo said. Only if we live to cook it. Deal. And with that they stepped forward again, toward the final chamber and the fight of their lives. They slipped back into the violet-lit chamber like hunters slipping into a storm. The crystal glow above pulsed slow and sickly, casting the webs in bruised color. Silk coated the walls in layered sheets and ropey bridges, drooping into catenary arcs over a floor spangled with chitin shards and shed skins. The air was noisy in a quiet way, tiny fibrils humming, egg sacs ticking faintly, a low breath that wasn't theirs reverberating through stone. Inigo raised one hand. Hold. The shadow at the far end wasn't a boulder. It was a back, armored with layered plates the color of tarnished iron, stippled with white scars. The body filled a hollow between 4 columns of stone, legs folded in a throne of web. A sloped abdomen, vast, pitted, striated with ugly seams, rose and fell with that subterranean breath. Lyra leaned close, voice thinner than a whisper. It's bigger than a troll. Big doesn't change physics, Inigo murmured. Joints, eyes, spinnerets. We blind her, slow her, break her stance. You take the highs, I take the lows. Lyra's nod was a feather's weight. She knelt and drew 3 arrows, laying them across her thigh as she knocked the first. Inigo rolled his shoulders once. Blue sigils crept under the skin like bioluminescent ink and settled over calves and feet. He flexed his hands, tendons hot, nerves tuned. The M4 sat snug against his chest, safety off, a round already chambered. On my shot, he said. He sighted an eye, a glossy coal set deep in a cranial plate. He controlled his breathing, half in, half out, and squeezed. Frick. The brood mother uncoiled in a single nightmare motion. Legs like stacked scythes slammed to the floor, the web thrown snapped apart, and a furnace hiss rose from her throat. The first bullet hit the eye, fluid misted. She reared, thrashing, smashing a stone column into rubble. Debris sprayed like shrapnel. Lyra's first arrow flashed bright and pinned a smaller ocular cluster along the left ridge. A second arrow followed, hard into the hinge where the forward left leg met carapace. The titan lurched, stumbled, and then he spat. A jet of viscous acid slashed the air where Lyra had been. Lyra Dove rolled, came up behind a fin of rock. The acid hit stone. It hissed, ate, smoked. Spit, Inigo barked. Cover. He dashed. The enchantment pulled the world into a smear. He crossed 10 meters in a gasp of blue light, slid behind a stalagmite as a foreleg speared down, fractured the stone tip like glass. He popped out the other side and iron-sighted the base of that leg, short, controlled bursts. Black ichor spattered. The brood mother snapped the leg back, curling it tight to protect the wound. Lower left joint soft, he called. Lyra answered with a piercing shot that buried to the fletching exactly where he'd opened flesh. The leg convulsed and skidded, skidding spiderweight carving trenches into webbed floor. The ceiling sang as tension redistributed. Webs strummed like 1,000 harps as the monster adjusted posture. Then the ceiling itself blinked. They weren't alone. Hatchlings, too big to be called spiderlings, too fast to be called anything but trouble, rippled down in a studded curtain. Half the chamber moved. Lyra loosed twice, 3 times. Inigo swept bursts across a line charging his flank. Skittering bodies tumbled, legs pinwheeling. Broodchirps, high needling, filled the air. The larger mother surged behind the tide, a fortress pushing a flood. Flash. Inigo shouted, palming a cylinder. Lyra covered her eyes without being told. He thumbed tossed. White sun. Sound compacted to a shock. Even prepared, his ears rang. He moved in the silence, a smear of blue crossing to the right pillar, sliding behind it as blinded hatchlings thrashed and clattered over each other. The brood mother shook her head, plates grinding, mandibles clacking, trying to wipe the white out of 1,000 facets. Inigo fired into an exposed slit between head plate and thorax. The rifle hammered his shoulder. Ichor jetted, hissing where it struck web. Lyra vaulted a fallen web beam, landed on a ledge, and shot down an arrow like a skewer into a spinneret cluster beneath the abdomen. Silk geysered, uncontrolled, rope-thick streamers knotting the broodmother's rear legs. The giant screamed. An ugly cello note played too hard. She tangles. Lyra cried, already drawing again. Keep her tangled. The broodmother slammed her abdomen to the ground, smashing spinnerets against stone to clear blockages. The force shook the chamber. Crystals shivered and shed dust. Hatchlings, recovering, split without orders. Half launched at Lyra's ledge, half swarmed for Inigo's pillar. He went vertical. 1 step up the rock, then a light-assisted leap, hands catching a webline, body swinging. He let go and dropped behind the oncoming wave. Pivot, raise, 2 round bursts to the back plates where chitin thinned before the abdomen. 3 fell, 2 more turned and leaped. He dashed again, a smear to their side, boots biting stone, and met the closest with a rifle muzzle underfong. Prick. He snapped the stock into the second's eye cluster, bone crunch, and kicked it off his knee. Lyra's ledge dissolved. Hatchlings flowed up it like ants up a stick. She gave ground, then stopped giving. She spun, shot, each arrow ripping an eye, a joint, a mouth. He kept one half drawn, the other half loosed, the rhythm like breathing. When one landed close, she slammed it with the bow's limb and stabbed it with an arrowhead, then pivoted into a next shot before the body hit the ground. Inigo, she called. She's angling for me. He saw it. The broodmother's bulk turning, front lifted, rear legs braced, pedipalps flexing. She charged like a siege tower. Inigo sprinted, then went higher. He jumped for a hanging web bridge, caught it, ran along it with the enchantment keeping him light, then kicked off the wall. He came down on the broodmother's forward carapace. The world narrowed to plates and seams and heat. He jammed the rifle muzzle into the cracked eye he'd ruined at first shot and fired point blank. The gun thundered. The eye caved completely. Fluid sprayed his chest, hot and stinking. The broodmother bucked. He flew. Stone met shoulder. He rolled, came up on one knee, gasping. The rifle clattered, skidding. He hand-snatched it mid-scramble as a foreleg hammered the ground where he'd been. He dashed under the monster's belly, sliding in ichor, and planted 2 shots into the soft triangle between thorax plates. The scream this time shook dust from the ceiling. Lyra found an angle, put an arrow through the far medial joint, one of the load-bearing legs. The limb folded. The beast listed. Oil. Inigo snapped, brain flipping through the entrance cache, the side shack, the rope coil bouncing at his belt. He pulled the coil free, looped it around a fallen stalagmite and dashed zigzag, dragging the rope low across the broodmother's rear legs, weaving a crude trip snare under her own silk. Cut her to kneel. Lyra understood immediately. She shot 2 more spinnerets. Uncontrolled silk blasted and tangled with his rope. The huge abdomen kicked, slipped on its own secretions. The broodmother reacted with malice. She spat again, this time a wide fan, not a jet. Inigo rolled. The acid sheet sprayed past, a curtain that turned web to froth. A few drops freckled his sleeve, fabric smoldered, skin prickling. He hissed and slapped it out. Watch the spit pattern, she can fan it, he said. Copy. Hatchlings regrouped, smarter now, working around his dashes trying to flank. He swapped to short control bursts, conserving what was left of his magazine, and brought one up only when it dropped from above. He shot it mid-fall, then kicked the corpse into 2 more. The broodmother lunged to close the distance to Lyra's ledge, and the makeshift snare caught. Her rear legs knotted in rope and silk. The huge abdomen thumped again, she dragged rock, shredding the rope, but not before momentum forced her front low. For 1 second, 1 precious second, her head plate angled down, exposing the pale hinge under the armored brim. Now! Inigo shouted. Lyra took the shot she'd been waiting for. The arrow left her bow with a sharp, singing hiss, and drove deep at that hinge. The monster's head snapped, not fully severed but jolted. She shrieked and flung her front legs blindly, battering pillars, spraying more acid. Inigo rushed the gap. He yanked an incendiary from his vest, bit the pin free with a grimace, and slammed it onto the fresh silk at the abdomen's base. Fire in the nest. He dashed back out as the grenade's chemical core bloomed. Flame uncoiled along the silk like a hungry serpent, bright and fast, racing across webs overhead, jellied heat dripping in blazing beads. Egg sacs hissed and burst like overripe fruit. A reek of scorched protein filled the air. The broodmother panicked. All the world became motion, her, them, flame, silk. She thrashed, the chamber shuddered. 1 stone column cracked top to bottom. Crystals rained like hail. Hatchlings screamed. Some fled the flames, some ran straight into them. Lyra shot everything that came near her. Inigo shot everything that came near her too. Ceiling! Lyra cried, pointing with her next arrow. Fire took a swath of web that had been load-bearing above their entry tunnel. Strands snapped like bowstrings. Rock groaned. Time to relocate. Inigo slammed a fresh mag, last one. Home racked the bolt and covered Lyra as she ran a contour path along the wall to a new perch. He dashed to a low saddle of stone and dropped behind it. The broodmother, crazed, advanced through fire, plates blackening, wounds leaking. The left front joint, arrow wedged, bullet torn, buckled again. She put weight there anyway, spite stronger than pain. Her eyes are failing, Lyra said, noticing the aimless rocking of the head. We can blind her. Not can, do. He time-sliced the chaos. 2 seconds of suppression left, 1 second to move, 3 to draw her spit, and in that window Lyra to take 3 shots at 3 remaining eye clusters. They didn't need to speak it. They'd rehearsed plans in other lives, other fights. He stood on the saddle a hair too tall, fired a double burst into her mandible to enrage and stepped left. The spit fanned hard right, where he'd been. Lyra's arrows thrummed, cruel and true. 1, 2, 3, and 3 clusters guttered out like lamps in rain. The monster was not blind, but the world to her had narrowed to heat and pain and sound. Last trick, Inigo said, voice low. He slid a second incendiary from the vest and palmed it. Spinnerets again. If she can't clutch to web, she can't find footing once we make the floor worse. Lyra's smile was grim. Make it worse. He dashed for the tail end, shoes skating on melted silk. A foreleg stabbed where his head had been a breath ago. He hopped, planted foot to leg, vaulted off like a springboard and landed behind the abdomen. He slapped the incendiary under the spinneret rosette. It stuck in slick threads, blinking red. The brood mother vented a raw, wordless hatred through her mandibles. She convulsed the abdomen, the grenade popped. Fire jetted like a forge blast. Silk fouled, sloughed, ignited. The enormous body lurched, slid and then dropped to one side, legs scraping for purchase and finding only gummed, flaming ropes. Pull back. Inigo called, grabbing a fistful of Lyra's cloak as another section of ceiling web gave way with a gunshot snap. A stone fin fell where she had stood. They slid together behind a slab as smoke thickened and the chamber cracked like an eggshell. The brood mother tried to retreat, toward a darker tunnel that tunneled deeper, but her rear was aflame and her forward placements were failing. She slammed her body into the wall to smother the fire and in so doing, tore open a new seam in the stone. A hot draft exhaled from it, old air, deep earth. Lyra took a long shot in that brief stillness. The arrow sank into the seam between headplate and neck, deep enough to matter but not to end it. The monster spasmed and fell half sideways, one leg tangled in a burning cable of silk. Inigo, she said, voice tight, eyes watering from smoke. We need to finish this. We will, he said. He felt the magazine's weight. Light. He gauged the room worse. Fire was eating their cover and their air. They'd bloodied her hard, blinded her mostly, fouled her silk and taken her footing. And still the broodmother lived. She rallied all the mass she had left, lifted her front in a last hateful rise, and screamed. The sound cleaved the smoke. The remaining hatchlings, dozens they hadn't seen, poured from the deeper crack behind her like black water. Of course, Inigo growled. Lyra lifted 3 arrows in one hand. Second wave. He bared his teeth in something that wasn't quite a grin. Then we drown it in fire. They rose together into the ash-bright chamber, side by side as the second wave hit like a tide.